Hi, I'm Val Kratzman, and today we're going to talk about market entry and what it really means to you as a new company, either growing in the United States or coming into the United States. I've named my talk today, Refocus, Rethink, Reframe, and Grow. So you keep that in your mind, we can basically get through and you can grow your company. So let's start with an opening question. These are balls. How many sides do a ball have? It's an old joke that I heard from a kindergartner when I was in second grade, and it's kind of stayed with me. And it's a very, very important question today when it comes to respect to growing our companies. So the answer is really foundational thinking. We have a ball and it has two sides, an inside and an outside. And inside out and outside in are two strategies that companies can take from figuring out how they want to build and grow themselves. So let's take a look. If you're an inside out company, you're taking the approach, what are we offering? What business processes will we implement that customers will use? What other information from the customers do we need to choose and close a good deal? And what can we do with other or similar customers? On the outside inside of the equation, what are my customers' true needs? What can I create to make it easier for them? So as you can see, right now, the thought processes are very, very different. Continuing on the outside in, can the customer accomplish what they need across multiple channels easily by working with me? And what else can we offer now and in the future that has real value? So on the surface, one side of the equation, you're a technology-centric company. On the other side of the equation, you're a market-centric company. So let's dig in a little deeper. The premise on the inside outside of the equation is by building a company's strength and by building up a company's strengths and abilities, they can sustain itself. So it's all about what you have inside the company. You leverage your internal competencies, your talent, your knowledge, your know-how, and efficient processes. And you're viewed as solution hunting for a problem. And this is not what venture capitalists like to hear. They don't like people who say, I've got a problem, a solution, and I need a problem. That's not the way to go. On the other side, we have outside in, and the premise is that you're going to provide customers with value, and this is the only way to succeed. So it involves what's taking an external market orientation perspective. You're going to look at the market, you're going to look at the possible range of customers, and you're going to work it backwards and create due diligence. And as you start bringing in the information backwards, layer by layer, you start understanding what you as a company have to do and what you shouldn't feel like. And most of the time, we talk about this as systems thinking. In systems thinking, instead of using time in the financial sense, break-even point, time to market, return on investment, let's think of time as past, present, and future. Reactive companies live in the past. They are basically like where they are. They don't want to change, and they don't want to know anything that's going to happen in the future. The inactive company lives in the present. They live today. They know that some of the information from the past was valuable, but they definitely want to push the future off. And in most cases, inactive companies will form committees to discuss something. The committee will come up with an answer. Then they'll form another committee to discuss the results and figure out what to use with it. And they just have this snowball effect of having committees discuss things. So ironically, inactive companies are highly active so they can stand still. The pre-active companies, we used to call them the dot-coms. These are the guys who got out there first ahead of everyone and then made the decision that whoever was going to catch up had to pay them the catch up. So they had to pay, as the expression goes, pay rent. But the problem was that they were already out in the future, and if the market changes, they were stuck, hence the dot-com bubble burst. The interactive or the proactive, again, we can play with words here, are companies that use all the information, past, present, and future, and based on that, they can make good decisions. So if you have an idea and you want to get to the market, there's this gap. So the question is, what's really in the gap and what do you do with the gap? This is a very simple linear picture, but it could be cyclical. And it tells you there's multiple steps to go from idea to market. What the graphic does not tell you is that there's a whole bunch of models on the left-hand side and another set of models on the right-hand side. But today we're going to focus what's in the middle. So I tend to say, let's start with the value proposition. If you know what problem you're solving, if you know your benefits, who your audience is, if you know how to build a network, more importantly, if you know what's wrong with either your possible customers or the market, and then you can validate who you are, then you know who your value is, you can actually go right ahead and jump into the marketplace. But if you cannot effectively define your value proposition, then you have to go backwards. And we start with an internal assessment. We talk about needs definition. What do I need as a company to grow? I know a little bit about the marketplace, but what does that really mean to me? Do I have the right people in the right place doing the right things? Are my resources and capabilities, and we'll come and talk about that again in a bit, are they the maximum, and can I really grow my company with resources and capabilities? And more importantly, you're going to ask yourself that same question that venture capitalists are going to ask you. Who's going to buy it and why? If you can't do the internal assessment quickly, and if there's holes, it means you don't understand the market. So the market research starts. And what I've highlighted here is yellow, and yellow are what many people do for their traditional market research. Who are my competitors? Who are my customers? What are the government or regulatory issues I have to pay attention to? What's going on in the environment, and who are the suppliers? But as you can see, traditional market research tends to be incomplete. You also have to focus on complementers, substitutes, new entrants, companies who look and feel like me. And then you have to figure out how to glue it together. So what we have, what we call strategic industry factors. The next step is in a strategic assessment. And this is where you're taking the first two steps, internal market research, internal market assessment, and external market research, and gluing it together. So you can see the two sides of the ball do form a whole. And this is really external information applied internally. You're comparing yourself to your competitors. You're putting yourself into scenarios that you're understanding what's going on in the marketplace. You're preparing for going out into the marketplace to meet and talk to people. You're defining who my network could be, who are key opinion leaders, who are people I need to talk to, and get who do I have to have know me. You're going to draft your business plan, and the business plan is a living document, so be prepared to change it. And then you're also going to draft the first message and platform and positioning. So you're going to now say, what are the possible value propositions I could have? And then you go into the marketplace, and you're going to go into the marketplace with as much objectivity as you can. You want to soft test your ideas, your company. You want to do it in such a way that you don't get hurt. You want to ask people what's wrong with what I'm doing versus what's right with what I'm doing. And then you have to be prepared to modify and adapt and reassess. And this discovery tour, and that's like basically is going into the marketplace and doing due diligence, really is the foundation of your network. Now you're at a point to say, what problem am I solving, and what is my value proposition? If you can do that, then you want to pitch. And you want to start talking to people on how can we work together. You don't want to sell. You want to find out how you can work together. So you test where you cannot get hurt. You perfect it. You go for some of the low-hanging fruit. If you have to pay for a pilot or a test, you pay for it because you want to learn real time in the marketplace. You want to refine your business plan and plan for execution and change. And then once you're validated in the marketplace, you can do that go or no go assess. And at this point, you're really listening to and internalizing what you're hearing from the marketplace. You're asking what's wrong and you're fixing it. You're positioning yourself as a valuable and needed resource, and you're giving yourself the necessary time. So that's the roadmap. Now, you probably have seen that I like the concept of dualism, inside and outside. And dualism is going to be a theme as you grow your company. So success requires a set of advantages. Most of the time you talk about having a strategic or a competitive advantage. The reality is you need both. A competitive advantage tends to be inside out. The strategic tends to be outside in. You really have to figure out how to merge them. And it's a balancing act, and it's not easy, but it's very, very possible. And then the advantage cycles are where the same knowledge, use of knowledge, and actions become integrated. So you'll see in my next models that really the models don't change, it's how you use the models. So let's take a look at the competitive advantage. There's 5 key elements: knowledge, planning, internalization, commitment, and assessment. And you're going to do something different in each of these, but it's going to be sequenced. Now, what's interesting is there's 6 different types of knowledge. There's macro knowledge. What's going on in my market? There's micro market knowledge. What's going on in my sub-market? There's institutional knowledge. What do I know about what my company or previous companies that I work for did? There's historical knowledge. What have I done? What have colleagues of mine done in the past? There's developing knowledge, which is what you're doing right now, which is market research. And then the last category is quite interesting. It's skeptical knowledge. I've found something, I've unearthed something, I've heard something, but I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do with it. A lot of companies make the error of throwing it away. Skeptical knowledge is invaluable. Never, ever throw it away. So once you have knowledge, you can move to opportunity recognition. I have options A, B, and C. And then you're going to evaluate them and you're going to manage that knowledge in those scenarios. And then you're going to go back out to the marketplace and you're going to test which one is best for me. And that allows you to go to planning and internalization. On the planning side of the equation, you're going to start the strategy foundation. You're going to plan, how do I have to build the company? Who do I need to hire? What do I need to do to change, adapt, and modify? And then you're going to internalize it. And the key points of internalization are quite simple. How much time, people, and money am I going to commit to this process? If you cannot move to that point of commitment and say, I'm going to try option A and option B and go into the marketplace and try it, then you're not prepared to grow. Hence, you move to implementation. In implementation, you know what step I'm going to take forward and what's going to happen if I have to fall back. And then where other companies tend to fail is that assessment. Once I've launched and I'm successful, they tend to say, great, but they don't go back and reassess. What did we do to get here? What do we need to do to go forward? And the cycle repeats itself. That's your competitive advantage because you've learned who you are and how you can be viable and sustainable and growing in the marketplace. And if you notice, on the competitive side of the equation, we're hanging out on the left side of the model, working with knowledge and figuring out how the knowledge is going to make us smarter and richer. Now, the strategic advantage uses the same model. And on this time, on the strategic side of the equation, we're on the right side of the model. So how do we take that tailored external business and market knowledge and assessment and bring it into the company? So we want to use external knowledge and we want to apply it and use it internally. This means that our strategy or plans are being sharpened. They're being focused. They're becoming market-centric, not technology-centric. And we then have that internally redefined, positioned, externally applied company. So what does that mean? It means you've remade yourself in the eyes of the market, not in your own eyes. You're who the market wants you to be, not who you think you should be. And that's a very important psychological distinction. So we now have this competitive advantage and the strategic advantage. This allows us to talk about what does the integrated framework look like. So obviously, let's start inside and outside. On the inside of the equation, we have resources. These are things that you buy, that you can control, that you can convert into resources or cash. So it's your computers, it's your laboratories, it's your manufacturing capabilities. And then we have capabilities, which is basically the brain power. So how does the brain power and the physical things you buy that you put into the company come together? The capabilities tend to be information-based knowledge. They tend to be firm-specific. This is who we are and this is what we're doing. They can be tangible or intangible. And they become what we can call intermediary goods, and you can actually leverage them to move forward. But just having resources and capability alone does not really let you grow your business or understand who you are, who you should serve, and where the future lies. So you have to integrate these two. Now, on the external side of the equation, I think you might recognize those words. Those were our traditional market research words. Now, let's complete them. Most of the time, you have to know who your competitors are and you have to differentiate yourself. But the interesting thing is that competitors can also become customers because they may have a problem and you may have a solution. Now, I've heard many times people say that I'm the only person that has that and therefore someone will buy it. Well, that's a very incomplete statement because there's always what we call the substitutes. You are creating something new, but you're replacing something that the market has been using. You're replacing the standard. You're replacing something that exists. So you have to be prepared for people to say, I'm not changing. Now, across from the substitutes, we have our complementers. And these are the people who will finish something with you, or you will finish something with them. You each have a piece of the puzzle, but you don't have the whole. So the reality is when you do market research, you need to pay attention to rivals, customers, substitutes, competitors, because they all have interchangeable roles. Now there's a fifth group down here called new entrants. These are people who look and feel like you. They have something, they're not quite sure what they have, they're not quite sure where it belongs. So when you do your market research, you want to figure out, am I a piece of something? Do I complete something? Can I stand alone? Am I acquisition target for somebody? These are all very important. We always have to pay attention to the government, the regulations, the insurance laws. Environmental factors are going to be important, as well as the suppliers. And when I talk about environmental factors, I'm talking about what's happening in the marketplace that's directly and indirectly attached to your company. When you start combining all of these together, you can create what we call strategic industry factors. They're industry specific. They're resources and capability that are subject to market failure. So this is the outside, how it really applies to you inside, not to anybody else, but just to you. They affect the industry profitability. So knowing how these players around this box function, it affects the profitability of the industry. And they're changed and subject to uncertainty. And a lot of times that change and uncertainty comes from Wall Street and the financial markets saying something like, ABC Corporation just invested in XYZ Corporation, and XYZ Corporation's unknown. They're making a dangerous move. But XYZ Corporation may be the best complementer or completer to their technology. So these are all variables. Now, we take all that information and we bring it back to the company. And we bring it back to the company in the form of strategic assets. And our next step is to create the strategic assets. So these are subsets of the resources and capabilities that are subject to market failure. So these are things that you have now validated and verified that are important to you and important to the market together. They're not trainable. You own them. They only work for you. They're complementary. It means that you and the marketplace are now becoming in sync with each other. And they will overlap with industry success factors. They will determine the economic rents, hence the profitability. They can be scarce. They will affect competition. And at this point, people will pay attention to you. Maybe not the way you want to, but they'll pay attention. And they form the basis for both your competitive and strategic strategy. And the final step now is that interchange between the inside and the outside. What I always tell my clients and companies I work with, that if you can do this model nicely, and it really only takes about 45 days to do it, you have a complete business plan and you know what you should be doing. You've heard of business plan canvases. Well, this is another variation on it, maybe a little more streamlined or maybe a little more focused. But the reality is that one page, if you can fill it out, that's your business model. So what is market entry? What is it? I've talked about it, but I haven't told you what it is. And you're going to find that market entry is surrounded with tons of questions. What does it mean to me and my company? What are my objectives? Are my objectives right or even relevant? What do I need to reach my objectives? And what do I need to grow my company? Now, if you notice, I'm talking about company, not technology. And in the gray shadows behind all these questions, here's yet another question for you. Are you going to love your company or do you love your product? And that's a very, very important question to ask. The reality is you have to love your company. Your product is disposable. It's something that you will start with. It will change. It will modify as you work with the industry, as you work with partners, and it will elevate your company. If you love your product, you're going to die. If you love your company, you will grow. So questions will flow freely and you need answers. I tend to say that there's 65 questions venture capitalists will ask startups. So here's 12 of the basics. They're going to ask about the company, your knowledge of the market, about the founders and the team. Are they the right people to drive the company and be invested in? They're going to ask about products and services. They're going to ask about the competition. They're going to ask where you fit in terms of product, services, and competition, in terms of what is your solution. They're going to ask whether you're flexible and adaptable, and they will see that very, very quickly. They will always ask about intellectual property. One of the VCs I work with makes intellectual property their first question. And if you can't get through the intellectual property due diligence, the conversation is over. They're going to ask about financials, about customer acquisition, about risks, and about your level of commitment. So we can go back to our cycles, the competitive advantage and strategic advantage. And where's that one model, the one bullet point there of commitment. And they do all this to define and understand and create relevance. And that's really what it comes down to, is you really want to have the concept of relevance coming into the company so that you are seen as relevant and a solution provider. Now, healthcare adds other considerations. And this is where the puzzle gets a little more confusing, but it's still very, very easy to put together. So the first questions are, do you fit into my workflow? Or are you FDA approved? Do you have reimbursement reimbursement code? And do you have clinical evidence to say that my patients or my hospital will benefit from this? But there's more questions. Do you have a biomedical engineering staff? Do you have key opinion leaders who are a champion? Do you have a local presence? And then yet another set of questions. What are your levels of tolerance versus growth? Are you scalable? And can you transition and manage from access to entry? You've spoken to me, you've come to the marketplace, but now can you actually scale the company and grow? So these are all the variables we have to pay attention to in the healthcare side of the equation. And each industry will have its own set of sub-questions. Growth shift beyond matching needs. So we now come to contextual relevance meets market entry, and I'm actually going to give you a definition of market entry. So what is market entry? I will give you a hint. Market entry does not mean selling. And this is where a lot of companies fail and fall apart. They think that they make it, therefore they can sell it, but it's not that easy and it's not clean. And if you also remembered, I've been talking about what you do with the company, not what you do with the product. So what is the definition of market entry? Strategic business options. What can I do with my company? Your product is going to be part of your resource and capability mix, and it will change based on strategic market factors. So entry is also case by case. You can learn by looking at others, but you're not going to succeed by copying. And timing and readiness are critical. And so you have to plan accordingly. In healthcare, we tend to say it's a 3 to 5 year timeline to get into the marketplace. Each industry is a little different. The high-tech industry, you can be in and out of the market in 3 weeks. So what problems do you solve? And what are multiple solutions that you might have? Those are your fallback positions. Are they real and perceived? Does the market see my solution as real? Do I perceive my solution as real? Perception and expectations are very, very important to take into consideration. You need to show a specific market-defined need and your solution, and that you have value. That's how people pay attention to you. In healthcare, we say that it's all about the company meeting clinical and market needs with a really sharp focus on what we call the quadruple aim. How am I going to reduce the cost of care? How am I going to improve the quality of care? How am I going to prevent provider burnout? And how am I going to improve population health? You will always have to keep those 4 points in mind when it comes to healthcare. So we talked about inside and outside. Let's talk from a different perspective. So the concept of duality comes back from a different idea. How do I take technical feasibility and integrate it with business viability? I know I can make it, but I don't necessarily know if I can sell it. So it really gets into product manufacturing and product desirability. Does what I have become a desirable commodity or a desirable, uniquely needed resource? So the questions come back. How do we do it? Merged and integrated with why we should do it. The technical solution now merges with the business solution. And when we glue all that together, we have a value proposition. So when you start to talk to people, you've heard about the concept of storytelling. What they want to hear is your effective marketing story, not your ineffective science or technology story. And in my last bullet point, I have a little trick question for you. They want to know that you understand and know their business better than they do. Several of the hospitals that I work with have said to me, ask your clients why they want to be in my hospital. So that's the key indication. You have to know their business better than they do so that they say, this is a natural fit for us. Your goal is to optimize the market needs and convince your audience that you are a solution, possibly the solution. You need to show relevant value in how you fit into their workflow. In the puzzle model there, we showed about workflow as one of the most important elements. They don't have time to change how they do business or how they work because you think you have the better mousetrap. You have less than 30 seconds to start and keep the conversation alive. We all know that as the elevator pitch, but it's very, very real. And what I ask a lot of my companies to do is, can you effectively tell anyone who has no idea who you are or what you do in 7 words? So if you think about the value proposition from 7 words, and you think about storytelling, it's impossible to talk about the technology in 7 words. It is very, very easy and logical and necessary to talk about the value you bring in 7 words. So let's look at comparative environments, and let's take this from a different perspective. We have Finland and the United States. Since most of my work is in Finland, we have 2 triangles. One is small, one is large. I think that geographic landmass can tell us that we can do it that way. But the whole story and the whole foundation of competitive environments is not about technology. So Finland is a small, homogeneous, easy to reach technology-oriented marketplace. The United States is large, multicultural, noisy, hyper-competitive marketplace. In theory, they're opposites, okay? Let's keep that in mind. Now, if we control and look at the markets, and it doesn't have to be US and Finland, it could be you and another company, it can be you and another geographic location, but we want to control and understand how the marketplaces function based on the resources that are put into the company. So we have product and marketing, technology and product, and management and finance. For our case today, we're going to focus on management and finance, and we're going to use those as our control variable. And in the United States and Finland, they're almost the same, 30% in Finland, 35% in the US. That extra 5% in the United States can be related to either accounting or salary structure. I tend to say some tongue in cheek, the CEO salary. Now, let's look at the other variables. Finland puts 20% of its resources into product and marketing. The United States puts 40% of its resources into product and marketing. Finland puts 50% of its resources into technology and product, and the United States puts 25% of their resources into technology and product. So what I'm hoping you will see is that these are inverted 1-to-2 relationships. So 20% versus 40%, 25%, 50%. So we talked about it's not about the technology. So you can see that Finland is already disproportionately overspent on the technology side. I'm not a big person for formulas and spreadsheets, but what in this case, we're going to talk about success comes from having a marketing to engineering ratio that's greater than or equal to 1. So what does that mean? It means for every dollar that I spend to design and figure out what I want to make, I have to spend $1 or more to understand who's going to use it and why. So in theory, Finland has a negative marketing engineering ratio, and the United States has a positive marketing to engineering ratio. And to put this in perspective, the last time I checked was about 2 years ago. Apple had a marketing to engineering ratio of 21. They spent 21 times more money understanding the user than they did to design the technology. And that's a very, very important consideration. And especially in healthcare, where they're going to look at workflow and they're going to look at return on investment and the quadruple aim. So it is essential to understand and address the market needs in real times from the market perspective, not from the technology perspective. So we're going to set some new goals. We're going to work with knowledge. I told you there were 6 types of knowledge, but what I didn't tell you is there's things we know, 15% of the knowledge, things we don't know, 35%, and things we don't know that we don't know, which is 50%. Most companies launch their businesses with somewhere between 15 and 40% of the available knowledge. They're going into the market blind. They're going to get blindsided. This is what you want to prevent. So you want to maximize your chances for success by using all the information and converting it into knowledge. Information is one thing to have. When you convert it to something that's usable, it becomes knowledge. You want to adapt that integrative strategy. You want to have the competitive advantage, the strategic advantage. You want to balance inside and out. You want to balance technical feasibility versus market viability. You want to analyze and objectively balance all of that. You want to proactively develop the competitive advantage and merge it with your strategic advantage that only you can deliver. That's your value proposition. You want to position yourself to succeed and be prepared to throw away ideas and products that do not work. And you want to love your company. So in closing, we've talked about refocus, rethink, reframe, grow. What does it mean? It means you get to choose where you swim and you get to choose your partner, but you need to choose your partner wisely because you really don't know who's behind you and when. So thank you, and I'm welcome your questions and look forward to talking to you. Very good.